Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The light of 3 moons cast long shadows across the settlement as Kel finished sealing the outer membrane of her dwelling. Her 4 slender limbs worked methodically despite her exhaustion. Since Marn's death in the asteroid mining accident 6 cycles ago, every task had fallen to her alone. The dwelling required constant maintenance against the harsh elements of colony world Lumina 6, and her 3 young offspring demanded attention she struggled to provide. Mother Kel, the nutrition processor is malfunctioning again, called. Tev, her eldest, from within the dwelling's central chamber. Tev's voice carried the distinctive harmonics of prematurity, still high and fluting. Kel's outer eyelids closed briefly in resignation. Conserve energy, little ones. I will examine it when the sealing is complete. The distant rumble of a ship's engines interrupted her work. Unscheduled arrivals were rare on Lumina 6, a colony established far from the galactic trading routes, precisely for its isolation. The Lumari valued their separation from other species, particularly humans, whose emotional unpredictability both fascinated and disturbed them. The vessel that descended toward the landing zone was small, a personal transport ship with human configuration. Its descent pattern suggested damage, the trajectory wobbly and uncertain. Kel observed with the detached curiosity typical of her species as the ship made a rough landing, skidding slightly before coming to rest near the colony's maintenance facility. When the hatch opened, a single figure emerged. Even from a distance, Kel recognized the distinctive bipedal form of a human. The colony would not be pleased. Council leader Ven was already approaching the ship, flanked by 2 security officers. Kel abandoned her sealing work, drawn by an unusual sense of curiosity. Unlike most Lumari, she had encountered humans before during her scientific training. They were interesting. My navigational system failed during the ion storm, the human was explaining as Kel approached. I need repairs and supplies. I can pay or trade. The human was male, shorter than the average Lumari, but solidly built. His skin was darkened by exposure to solar radiation, his facial hair trimmed short around his mouth and chin. His eyes, startlingly expressive by Lumari standards, scanned the assembled colonists with what Kel recognized as wariness. This is not a trading post, Ven responded coldly. Humans are not welcome to establish residence on Lumina 6. I'm not looking to stay, the human replied. Just need repairs. Name's Jack. Jack Reeves. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Kel found herself stepping forward. Council leader, our laws provide for emergency assistance to any sentient being. She turned her large silver eyes toward the human. I have space in my dwelling. The repair facility is understaffed since the mining accident. Repairs may take several days. Ven's antennae twitched with disapproval. You would host this human with your offspring? I have experience with their species, Kel replied. And my dwelling has an isolation chamber since Marn's work with volatile compounds. The human, Jack, watched this exchange with narrowed eyes that suggested he understood more than they might assume. Many humans learned Lumari trade language. Very well, Ven finally agreed. But you bear responsibility for his actions, scientist. Kel? As they walked toward her dwelling, Kel's inner thoughts tumbled in confusion. Why had she offered shelter to this human? Perhaps it was scientific curiosity. Perhaps it was loneliness. Or perhaps, as she glanced at his capable hands and determined stride, it was the dim memory that humans possessed skills the Lumari had lost in their technological evolution, practical, physical skills that might prove useful to a widow with a crumbling dwelling and 3 hungry offspring. Thank you, Jack said simply, his voice low and resonant in a way that made her sensitive antennae vibrate slightly. I won't be trouble. Kel's offspring watched wide-eyed from the dwelling entrance as they approached. A new chapter was beginning. One that would challenge everything the Lumari thought they understood about humans. By the 3rd rotation, Jack had fixed the nutrition processor, reinforced the dwelling's outer membrane, and modified the water filtration system to improve efficiency by 20%. Kel observed his work with growing fascination. Where Lumari approached problems with careful analysis and predetermined methodologies, Jack seemed to improvise constantly, trying approaches that often seemed illogical until they suddenly worked. Your methods are unusual," she commented as he reconnected wiring beneath the dwelling's central control panel. Jack glanced up, a small metal tool held between his teeth. He removed it and smiled, that strange human expression that exposed teeth yet somehow conveyed positive emotion rather than aggression. "That's one way of putting it. Your systems are elegant but overcomplicated for basic functions." Her children had gradually moved from hiding whenever Jack entered a room to watching him openly. Tev, particularly, seemed fascinated by the human's physical capabilities. "Why do you have only 2 arms?" Tev asked suddenly, abandoning the characteristic Lumari reserve. "Is it not inefficient?" Jack laughed, the sound startling in the typically quiet dwelling. "Probably is, but we make do. Come here, I'll show you something cool." Kel watched as Jack demonstrated to her offspring how his human hands, with their multiple flexible digits, could manipulate objects with remarkable precision. When he showed them how he could throw and catch a small component with one hand, Pia, her youngest, made the high trilling sound of Lumari delight. "Mother Kel, the human can propel objects and recapture them. Can we learn this skill?" Pia asked, secondary eyelids blinking rapidly with excitement. "I do not believe our physiology would permit it," Kel replied, "but observation is educational." That evening, while the offspring slept in their incubation chambers, Kel found Jack outside the dwelling, looking up at the unfamiliar constellations. "Your colony leaders don't like humans much," he observed without looking at her. Kel settled beside him, her long limbs folding gracefully. "The Lumari value predictability and logical progression. Humans are seen as chaotic." Jack nodded. "Fair assessment. We're messy, emotional. Yet you accomplish much despite this, or perhaps because of it," Kel admitted. "You have repaired systems that our technicians declared irreparable." "Sometimes you need to kick things a little," Jack said with another smile. "Figuratively speaking, I have noticed you use many such expressions. Figurative language is uncommon among my people." Jack turned to study her, and Kel felt an unfamiliar sensation beneath her epidermis, as though her circulation had suddenly accelerated. The directness of human gaze was considered intrusive in Lumari culture, yet she did not look away. "You're different from the others," he said quietly. "I studied xenobiology before Marn's death," she explained. "My work required understanding, how other species think. And now you're stuck here, raising kids alone on the edge of nowhere." The accuracy of his assessment was startling. No Lumari would have stated such a personal observation so directly. It should have offended her. Instead, Kel found it curiously liberating. "Yes," she acknowledged simply. "Life has become a matter of survival rather than discovery." A sudden alert chime from the colony's central communication system interrupted their conversation. The synthetic voice announced, "Atmospheric disturbance approaching. Severity level critical. All colonists implement dwelling protection protocols immediately." Jack stood, surprisingly quick for his solid form. "What kind of storm are we talking?" "About electromagnetic and particulate," Kel explained, already moving toward the dwelling. "It will disable electronics and potentially breach membranes." As they hurried inside, Kel saw Jack's expression change to something she recognized from her xenobiology studies: human determination. It was an expression that had preceded many of their species' most remarkable achievements and some of their most terrible ones. "Let me help," he said. "I've weathered worse than this." The storm descended upon the colony with unexpected ferocity. The protective shields that normally deflected such disturbances flickered and died as electromagnetic pulses disrupted their carefully calibrated systems. Kel's dwelling, located on the settlement's perimeter, was among the most exposed. "Your automated defenses are down," Jack observed, voice raised over the howling winds that now penetrated the colony's atmospheric buffers. He moved with urgent purpose, examining the dwelling's structure. "This outer membrane won't hold. It's already weakening at the seams." Kel's antennae flattened against her head, a sign of distress she rarely displayed before others. The protocols dictate we should activate the secondary barriers, but they're not responding. Forget protocols, Jack said, already pulling equipment from his emergency pack. We need physical reinforcement. Where's your maintenance storage? While Kel directed him to the storage compartments, her 3 offspring huddled together in the poor dwelling's core chamber. Their exoskeletons had not yet hardened sufficiently to withstand extreme temperature variations, making them particularly vulnerable. Jack emerged with sealant sheets, adhesive compounds, and various tools Kel had never found use for. "These were your mates?" he asked, testing the edge of a cutting implement. "Yes. Marn believed in manual backups for critical systems," she replied, feeling a pang of what humans might call regret. The Colony Council considered it redundant and inefficient. "Well, score 1 for Marn," Jack muttered, laying out materials with practiced efficiency. "I need to physically reinforce your outer walls. Can you help me measure and cut these sheets?" What followed was unlike anything in Kel's experience. Jack worked with intuitive skill rather than calculated precision, making adjustments based on what he called feel rather than measurements. When the dwelling's power grid failed completely, plunging them into darkness, he produced light-generating devices from his pack without breaking stride. "Shouldn't we evacuate to the central shelter?" Kel asked, as the storm's intensity peaked, vibrating the dwelling's very foundation. Jack shook his head, continuing to apply reinforcement to a particularly vulnerable section. "Too late for that. Wind would throw your kids around like leaves. Better to hunker down and protect this space." The storm raged for 6 hours. Throughout, Jack moved constantly, addressing new breaches as they developed, showing Kel how to support his efforts. When a section of outer membrane finally tore away, he bodily blocked the opening while instructing her on creating a temporary seal. By the time the storm abated, Kel was exhausted, yet the dwelling remained intact. Her offspring were safe, though frightened by the experience. The same could not be said for many other dwellings in the colony. As the first light of dawn revealed the settlement, Kel saw numerous breaches and structural failures throughout. Council. Leader Ven arrived as they were assessing the external damage. "Your dwelling appears functional," he observed with surprise. The automated systems failed across the colony. "The human implemented manual protective measures," Kel explained. "Physical reinforcement rather than technological solutions." Jack emerged from checking the perimeter, his clothing stained with sealant and his face streaked with particulate matter. "Your neighbors need help," he said without preamble. 3 dwellings to the east have major breaches. Children inside." Ven's antennae quivered with mixed emotion, concern for the colony members, but obvious discomfort at taking direction from a human. "Our repair teams will address—" "There's no time for teams," Jack interrupted, already gathering supplies. "Those kids are exposed to thermal fluctuations. Some material wrapped around the breaches will hold until your people can make proper repairs." To Kel's surprise, several Lumari from nearby dwellings approached, offering assistance. Jack quickly organized them into groups, demonstrating simple repair techniques that required no special equipment. The logical, methodical Lumari adapted quickly, once shown what to do. "He thinks differently," observed Tev, who had ventured outside to watch. "Not sequential like us, but effective." Kel watched as Jack guided her neighbors with patience and urgency combined, a paradoxical approach that somehow yielded results. "Yes," she agreed. "Humans evolved solving physical problems before developing technology. They retain those instincts." "Is that why his skin changes color when he exerts himself?" Tev asked with scientific curiosity. "Evolutionary adaptation?" "Perhaps," Kel said, though she understood the physiological process was more complex. She found herself noticing details about Jack she had not previously catalogued. The way muscle moved beneath his skin, how his eyes crinkled when concentrating, the careful gentleness of his hands when working near Lumari children. Something was shifting in the colony's perception of this human, and in her own understanding as well. The storm had revealed a truth the Lumari had long ignored. Sometimes logic alone was insufficient. Sometimes survival required something else, something uniquely human. And then the knight said, "Dragons can be defeated, but only if you know their secret weakness." Jack sat cross-legged on the floor of the dwelling's common area, surrounded by Kel's 3 offspring. Power had been restored to most colony systems, but intermittent outages continued, and the children had grown anxious in the unexpected darkness. Jack's solution had been stories, fantastical narratives that Kel recognized held no factual basis, yet somehow captivated her young ones. "What is a dragon's weakness?" asked Lim, her middle child, usually so reserved, yet now leaning forward with unusual animation. "Well, that depends on the dragon," Jack replied seriously. "Some have a special scale missing right over their heart. Others can't resist riddles and will sit thinking so long they forget to fight." Pia's antennae quivered with confusion. "But dragons are not real biological entities. Why construct elaborate weaknesses for imaginary creatures?" Jack smiled. "That's the magic of stories, little one. They help us practice solving problems we haven't faced yet. Humans have been doing it for thousands of years." Kel observed from the cooking area, ostensibly preparing the evening meal but primarily watching this unusual interaction. Lumari education focused on factual information and practical skills. The concept of fictional narrative as teaching tool was foreign, yet evidently effective. Her offspring were fully engaged, their usual methodical thought patterns disrupted in what appeared to be a beneficial manner. "Mother Kel," called Tev suddenly, "did humans really explore space before developing quantum communication?" The question revealed how much Jack had been sharing about human history. "They did," she confirmed. "Human exploration has often preceded their technological readiness, according to xenological records." "Reckless," commented Lim. "Brave," countered Tev. Jack laughed softly. "Maybe both. We're not always the smartest species out here, but we're stubborn." When the offspring finally retreated to their resting chambers, Kel found herself alone with Jack in the common area. The dwelling felt different with him present, warmer somehow, though the environmental controls remained at standard settings. "Your children are brilliant," Jack said, helping her clear the meal remnants despite her assurance that the automated systems would manage it. "They think differently than human kids, but they're just as curious. They have responded unusually well to your presence," Kel acknowledged, "particularly Tev. Since Man's death, he has been withdrawn." Jack was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the utensil he was cleaning. "Losing a parent is hard. I remember when my father died. I was maybe a few years older than Tev." Kel's scientific curiosity emerged. "How did you process the emotional impact?" "Lumari children are taught to acknowledge the logical progression of life cycles, but they still experience disruption." "I acted out," Jack admitted. "Humans don't always handle grief logically, especially kids. And as an adult, when you lost your family in the Earth-Centauri conflict," Jack's posture changed subtly, a tension Kel hadn't intended to cause. "How did you know about that?" "Colony security protocols," she explained. "All visitors are researched to the extent possible. I apologize if referring to it causes distress." For several seconds, Jack was silent, and Kel wondered if she had committed some human social error. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "My wife and daughter were on a civilian transport. Wrong place, wrong time." His fingers traced patterns on the surface before him. "After that, I took this ship and just started moving, never staying anywhere long." Kel processed this information, trying to understand the emotional components that her species found so challenging. "Yet you seem comfortable here with offspring not your own." Jack's expression softened. "Your kids are special. They remind me that the universe keeps going, even when we think it shouldn't." "That is not logical," Kel observed, "but I find I understand the sentiment." Outside the dwelling, the colony's night cycle had fully descended. The 3 moons cast overlapping shadows that created complex patterns across the landscape. In this unusual light, Kel noticed how different Jack appeared from when he had first arrived. More relaxed, his movements in the dwelling now confident and familiar. "The repair facility estimates 3 more days for your ship," she said. Something flickered in Jack's expression. Hesitation, perhaps. "That's good," he said, though his tone suggested complexity beyond the simple words. Kel found herself experiencing an unfamiliar reluctance regarding his eventual departure. It was not logical. It was not typical of her species. Yet it existed. Nonetheless, a strange, human-like emotional response that both confused and intrigued her. "The offspring will miss your stories," she said carefully. Jack met her gaze, and in that moment, Kel wondered if humans could communicate without words, as the Lumari sometimes did, because something passed between them, something unnamed yet undeniably present. "Just the stories?" he asked quietly. Kel's antennae quivered slightly with an emotion she couldn't categorize. Perhaps not only the stories. The alert came during the colony's equivalent of early morning. The perimeter sensors had detected movement, multiple large biosignatures approaching from the forested region to the north. Colony leader Ven's voice echoed through the communication system with uncharacteristic urgency. "Attention all colonists. Predator incursion detected. Mysic pack moving southward toward the settlement. Defense grid activation failure. Implement emergency containment protocols immediately." Jack was already moving before the announcement finished, checking the dwelling's security measures. "What's a Mysic?" he asked Kel, his expression serious. "Apex predators, native to this continent," she explained, hurrying to secure her offspring in the dwelling's most protected chamber. "Large quadrupeds with superior olfactory tracking abilities. They hunt in coordinated groups and can breach standard membranes. How are they usually kept away from the colony?" "The perimeter generates sonic pulses at frequencies that cause them discomfort," Kel explained, checking the dwelling's reinforcements. "But the system appears non-functional after the storm." Jack's face took on the expression Kel now recognized as strategic consideration. "And your defensive options?" "Containment within reinforced structures until repair teams can restore the perimeter system." Jack shook his head. "How long will that take?" "Perhaps 6 hours for full restoration." "These Mysics, they'll be here a lot sooner than that, won't?" That Kel's silence was confirmation enough. The situation was precarious. Several dwellings remained compromised after the storm, leaving those families particularly vulnerable. Jack checked the primitive projectile weapon he carried, an item the colony security had reluctantly allowed him to retain. "I've tracked predators before on frontier worlds. With the right approach, we might be able to divert them." "That would contravene safety protocols," Kel pointed out, though without conviction. Safety protocols had not saved them during the storm. "Sometimes you have to write new protocols," Jack replied, already gathering equipment. "Can you show me their typical movement patterns, their vulnerabilities?" Kel hesitated only briefly before accessing the colony's biological database. As she displayed information about the Mysics, she noticed Jack absorbing details with remarkable focus, asking questions about behavior patterns, sensory capabilities, and previous encounter records. "They avoid fire," he noted, pointing to a behavioral observation, "and they're sensitive to certain chemical compounds. Do you have anything that could generate a controlled burn? Or compounds they find repellent?" Within the hour, Jack had assembled a crude but potentially effective deterrent system using materials from Marn's storage and chemicals from Kel's research supplies. When he prepared to leave the dwelling, Kel found herself blocking his path. "Sietha, Colony Council will not sanction this intervention," she warned. "I'm not asking their permission," Jack replied simply. "Those creatures are heading straight for the damaged section, where families haven't been able to relocate. Someone needs to redirect them." "Then I will accompany you," Kel stated, surprised by her own decisiveness. "My knowledge of local biology may prove useful." Jack seemed about to refuse, then nodded. "Your kids? They will remain with my neighbor Dren until our return." As they left the settlement's boundaries, several other Lumari observed their departure with visible concern. Colony leader Ven approached rapidly, antennae rigid with disapproval. "What is the meaning of this breach of containment protocol?" he demanded. Jack continued checking his equipment while Kel explained their intention. Ven's response was immediate and expected. "Absolutely forbidden. Return to your dwelling at once." To Kel's surprise, another voice joined the conversation. Trell, whose family occupied a dwelling in the damaged section. "My offspring cannot be relocated due to Len's compromised exoskeleton. If the Mysics breach our section, we have no adequate protection." "The humans' approach may merit consideration," added another colonist. one whose dwelling had been saved during the storm thanks to Jack's intervention. Ven's antennae quivered with conflicted signals. This is not how the Lumari address threats. We implement established protocols. The protocols failed during the storm, Kel stated quietly, and they are failing now. The tension was broken by distant vocalizations, the hunting calls of My-6 already too close for comfort. Jack used the moment to step away from the debate. I'm going with or without approval, he said firmly. Anyone who wants to help is welcome. To Kel's surprise, 4 Lumari stepped forward, including Trell. Ven watched with obvious dismay as Jack quickly organized them, assigning tasks based on their abilities and explaining his strategy with remarkable clarity. As they moved toward the perimeter, Kel found herself alongside Jack, matching his purposeful stride. This is not typical human behavior, she observed, placing oneself at risk for non-kin. Jack glanced at her with an expression she couldn't fully interpret. Maybe not typical, but it's human enough. Sometimes you just do what needs doing. The forest edge loomed before them, mist curling between alien vegetation. The Mesic calls were closer now, purposeful and coordinated. Jack checked his weapon once more, then turned to the small group of Lumari who had never faced such danger directly. Stay together, follow the plan, and remember, we're not trying to fight them, just redirect them. You all ready? The Lumari looked to Kel, who found herself nodding with newfound confidence. We are ready. Jack gave a small smile that somehow conveyed both concern and determination. Then let's go teach some alien predators to respect personal boundaries. The copper-tinged blood seeped between Kel's fingers as she applied pressure to Jack's wound. The Mysic's claws had torn through his protective clothing with disturbing ease, leaving 3 parallel lacerations across his upper arm. Despite this, his first words after the attack had been concern for Tev. The kid, is he okay? Jack asked, wincing as Kel applied antiseptic compounds from the emergency medical kit. Tev is unharmed, she assured him, antennae quivering with emotions too, complex to process fully. Thanks to your intervention, the diversion plan had worked initially. Jack's controlled fires and chemical deterrents had successfully redirected most of the Mysic pack away from the vulnerable colony section. But one young Mysic had broken from the group, circling back toward the settlement through dense undergrowth. Worse still, Tev had followed the expedition team against explicit instructions, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his caution. When the Mysic lunged from concealment directly toward Tev, Jack had moved without hesitation, placing himself between predator and child, with a speed Kel had not thought possible for human physiology. The resulting confrontation had left the Mysic retreating and Jack bleeding, with Tev shaking but unharmed. Couldn't let anything happen to him, Jack said simply, as though the choice to risk his life for a child not his own, not even his species, required no explanation. You could have been killed, Kel stated, her typically measured tone unsteady. Mysic claws often carry infectious agents. Worth the risk. Jack attempted a smile that became a grimace. Besides, I've had worse. Your son's a brave kid. Smart, too. He figured out the Mysic was doubling back before any of us adults noticed. Kel completed the wound treatment in silence, her mind processing multiple unfamiliar emotional responses. Fear, both the sharp terror when she'd seen Tev in danger, and the deeper dread upon seeing Jack injured. Gratitude that defied quantification, and something else entirely when Jack had reflexively grasped her hand during treatment, his 5 fingers intertwining briefly with her 4 in a contact that had sent unexpected sensations through her nervous system. The colony's medical facility was unusually busy when they returned. Several Lumari had sustained minor injuries during the Mysic encounter, though none as severe as Jack's. Colony leader Ven observed the treatment proceedings with an expression Kel recognized as conflicted evaluation. The perimeter defenses are now operational, Ven informed them as Jack's treatment concluded. The remaining Mysics have retreated. Beyond sensor range. Good to hear, Jack replied, testing his bandaged arm cautiously. Your intervention, while unorthodox and unsanctioned, Ven continued with visible effort, appears to have prevented more serious consequences. The colony acknowledges this contribution. From a Lumari leader, This constituted extraordinary recognition. Jack simply nodded, seemingly unaware of the significance. Later, in the privacy of her dwelling, Kel found herself struggling with unfamiliar thought patterns. The offspring had finally settled into their rest cycles after extensive questioning about the day's events. Tev, particularly, had been transformed by the experience, his typical Lumari reserve replaced by animated descriptions of Jack's actions that bordered on the emotional storytelling typical of humans. Jack sat on the dwelling's outer observation platform looking toward the forest where they had confronted the mysics. His arm was held carefully against his body, though he had dismissed further medical attention. Kel joined him, carrying a nutrient solution adapted for human physiology. "The offspring wished me to convey their gratitude," she said, offering the drink. "Particularly Tev." Jack accepted the container with a small smile. "No need. I just reacted." "That is what confounds us about humans," Kel admitted, settling beside him. "The Lumari calculate risk, consider outcomes, evaluate options. You react. Sometimes thinking too much slows you down when it matters," Jack responded, his gaze distant. "Sometimes you just have to feel what's right and do it." "Feel," Kel repeated, testing the concept. "My species considers emotional response inferior to logical analysis, yet you offered shelter to a stranded human when your leader clearly disapproved," Jack pointed out. "Was that pure logic?" The observation startled her. "I am not certain." They sat in companionable silence as Lumina 6's 3 moons rose fully above the horizon, bathing the landscape in overlapping light that created complex shadow patterns. Jack's breathing had the slight unevenness that indicated pain despite medication, yet he seemed at peace. "My ship will be repaired tomorrow," he said finally. "The technician sent confirmation while you were settling the kids." Kel experienced an immediate sensation she identified as disappointment. "You will continue your journey, then?" That was the plan. His voice held a question he didn't articulate. "The offspring have become accustomed to your presence," Kel said, carefully. "Your departure will create disruption." Jack turned to look at her directly, his eyes reflecting moonlight in a way that momentarily transfixed her. Just the kids. The directness of human communication remained challenging, yet Kel found herself responding in kind. "Not only the offspring, Kel," Jack began, then hesitated. "I've been wandering since I lost my family, never staying anywhere, never connecting. I told myself it was freedom, but maybe it was just fear." "Fear is an evolutionary protection mechanism," Kel observed, though she understood his meaning transcended biological function. "Maybe," Jack agreed, "but sometimes it just keeps you from living." He reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers in a gesture of potential contact rather than presumption. "I didn't expect to find anything here. Certainly not connections." Kel looked at his outstretched hand, so alien with its 5 digits, its flatter, less articulated structure, yet now familiar in ways that defied logical categorization. After a moment's hesitation, she extended her own hand, allowing contact. "The differences between our species are considerable," she said softly. "Yeah," Jack acknowledged, "but maybe the similarities matter more." As their hands remained linked, Kel found herself experiencing what humans would call hope, an emotion her species typically categorized as irrational anticipation. Yet in this moment, with stars overhead and a human beside her, irrationality seemed less problematic than she had been taught to believe. Kel stood at the entrance to Jack's temporary quarters within her dwelling, the silence of midnight broken only by the soft hum of environmental systems. The decision to seek him out at this hour was profoundly uncharacteristic. Lumari prized structured communication at appropriate designated intervals. Yet here she was, hesitating at his threshold, experiencing what humans called nervousness, an evolutionary response she found both irrational and undeniable. Jack's ship had been declared fully operational that afternoon. The colony's repair, technicians had completed their work efficiently, noting with reluctant admiration certain modifications Jack had apparently made to the propulsion system. His departure was scheduled for the following morning's light cycle. The offspring had not received this news well. Pier had retreated into unusual silence. Lim had systematically listed all the tasks that would become more difficult without Jack's assistance. And Tev. Tev had asked the question that had been forming in Kel's own mind. Why must Jack leave? We function more efficiently with him present. Is this not logical? Logic. The foundation of Lumari society, yet suddenly insufficient to explain. The complexity of their situation. How could she explain to her offspring that interspecies bonding was considered inappropriate by their society? That humans and Lumari rarely integrated their lives despite centuries of contact? That Jack had his own journey, his own healing to pursue among the stars? When Kel had not answered immediately, Tev had continued with the relentless perception, typical of juveniles. He protects us. He teaches us human skills. He makes you produce the harmonics of contentment, Mother Kel. I have observed this physiological response. The observation had sent Kel's antennae flattening against her skull, in what humans might recognize as embarrassment. She had not realized her biochemical responses were so transparent, even to her offspring. Now, standing at Jack's door in the midst of the night cycle, Kel questioned her own rationality. Yet she found herself activating the entry notification. Nonetheless, after a brief pause, the panel slid open to reveal Jack, clearly awake despite the hour. Kel? His voice held concern. Is everything all right? The kids okay? The offspring are in their rest cycle, she assured him. I wished to speak with you. Privately. Jack stepped aside, allowing her to enter the small space. Unlike most visitors who had occupied this chamber, he had left visible marks of his presence, tools arranged by function rather than size, garments draped rather than stored, and several small objects she recognized as personal keepsakes. I apologize for the inappropriate timing, Kel began formally, then found her carefully prepared statements deserting her. Jack waited, his expression open and patient. When she remained silent, he spoke gently. Something on your mind? You are leaving tomorrow, she stated, an obvious fact that nonetheless required articulation. That's the plan, he acknowledged, though something in his tone suggested uncertainty. The offspring have expressed concern regarding your departure. Jack's expression softened. I'll miss them too, they're amazing kids. Kel's forehands clasped together, a self-soothing gesture her species employed during stress. Our dwelling has functioned with greater efficiency during your presence. The offspring have acquired useful skills. The colony has benefited from your different approach to problem-solving. Jack watched her with growing comprehension. Kel, are you asking me to stay? The directness of human communication both challenged and liberated her. Yes, she admitted. That is my query. I don't think your council would approve a permanent human resident, Jack said carefully. From what I've seen, they barely tolerate visitors. Colony regulations permit immigration applications for individuals providing specialized skills unavailable within the existing population, Kel recited, having researched this thoroughly. Your abilities with manual repair, adaptive problem-solving and predator management are not duplicated among current colonists. Jack's lips curved slightly. You've really thought this through. It is logical, Kel insisted, though they both recognized this was not entirely true. Logic alone could not explain the acceleration of her circulatory system as she stood before him, nor the subtle harmonics that had entered her voice, the same contentment tones Tev had observed. Is it just for the colony? Jack asked quietly. For the kids? Kel hesitated, then took the most human action of her life. She reached out and placed one slender, four-fingered hand against his chest, feeling the unfamiliar rhythm of his single heart. Stay with me tonight, human, she said softly. My orphans crave a father figure, yes, but I... She paused, searching for words that transcended species differences. I have discovered that logic without companionship is an incomplete equation. Jack covered her hand with his own, the warmth of his skin resonating through her more sensitive epidermis. I've been running for a long time, he admitted. Maybe it's time to stand still, to build something instead of just surviving. You would consider remaining? despite the biological and cultural differences? His smile deepened. Differences don't scare me, Kel. Never have. It's what makes the universe interesting. The offspring would be pleased, she said, her voice containing emotions no Lumari would typically express so openly. And their mother? Jack asked, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand, in a gesture that sent unexpected signals through her nervous system. Their mother finds that her logical analysis and your intuitive approach create an effective complementary system, Kel replied, then added more softly, their mother would be happy in the human sense of the word. Jack gently pulled her closer, crossing species boundaries with a gesture that would shock many Lumari, but felt inexplicably right to Kel. Then maybe I should unpack my things. As the night deepened around them, Kel found herself contemplating the strange, illogical path that had brought this human to her dwelling and potentially into their lives. Perhaps some equations were meant to defy simple resolution. Perhaps some connections transcended evolutionary divergence and cultural expectations. Perhaps, as humans often claimed, some things were meant to be. 6 cycles later, the colony of Lumina 6 had changed in ways that would have been unimaginable before a damaged human ship had made its emergency landing. The most obvious physical change was the new structure adjacent to Kel's dwelling, Aces Chowni, hybrid construction, combining Lumari architectural principles with human practical modifications. Jack called it a workshop. The colony officially designated it an adaptive technology development facility. Inside this space, Jack had established what he termed an apprenticeship program, teaching interested colonists the manual skills that complemented their technological proficiency. The first class consisted of 8 young Lumari, including Tev, who had displayed remarkable aptitude for the hybrid problem-solving approach Jack advocated. Ensure the connection is secure, but not overly compressed, Jack instructed, as the young Lumari worked on repairing environmental regulation units. Remember, sometimes these components need a little flexibility to accommodate thermal expansion. Tev adjusted his work accordingly, his slender fingers now comfortable with tools designed for his 4-digit hands. Like this? Perfect, Jack confirmed with a smile. You've got good instincts for this. From the entrance, Kel observed the interaction with what she now recognized as pride, an emotion her species traditionally considered inappropriate, yet which she had come to value. The integration of human perspectives had not been without challenges, but the benefits were increasingly apparent. Colony leader Ven approached as she watched the training session. His initial opposition to Jack's continued presence had gradually transformed into reluctant acceptance, and more recently, cautious appreciation as colony functionality metrics showed measurable improvements. The Council has reviewed the proposal for expanding the apprenticeship program, Ven informed her, antennae positioned in the configuration indicating formal communication. It has been approved unanimously. This represented a significant shift from the narrow margin by which Jack's immigration application had initially passed. The colony benefits from diversity of approach, Kel observed. Ven's antennae twitched slightly, the Lumari equivalent of acknowledgement. Your mate's methods are unorthodox but effective. The recent moisture collection system modifications have increased efficiency by 23%. The term mate still caused a subtle reaction in Kel's circulation, a pleasant dissonance. The colony had required significant time to adjust to the concept of interspecies pairing, yet formal recognition had eventually been granted. Their union remained unique within this settlement, though communications from other colonies suggested similar arrangements were beginning to emerge elsewhere. Jack believes practical knowledge should complement theoretical understanding, Kel explained. The apprentices are learning to integrate both approaches. Indeed. Ven hesitated, then added with uncharacteristic informality, my own offspring has requested permission to join the next training cohort. This was unexpected. Ven's family represented one of the colony's most traditional lineages. They would be welcome, Kel assured him. Their conversation was interrupted by Pier and Lim racing into the facility, accompanied by several other Lumari children and carrying what appeared to be modified communication devices. "Jack, we completed the modifications," Pier announced, holding up the device proudly. "The signal now penetrates the Eastern Canyon for exploration communications." "Outstanding," Jack replied, examining their work with genuine interest. "You've created a practical solution to a real problem. That's what this is all about." The children, both Kel's offspring and others, clustered around Jack with an enthusiasm once considered inappropriate in Lumari youth. Yet colony educators had noted improved learning outcomes since emotional engagement had been cautiously integrated into traditional instruction methods. As evening approached, Kel and Jack walked along the colony's perimeter, now enhanced with both technological defenses and physical barriers, another hybrid solution that had proven more effective than either approach alone. The three moons created their familiar overlapping light patterns across the landscape. The colony's orbital communication array detected another human vessel in the system, Kel mentioned. "They have requested permission to establish trading." "Relations," Jack nodded thoughtfully. It was bound to happen eventually. Word spreads about hospitable outposts, especially ones with unique opportunities. "The Council is considering the request favorably," Kel added. "Your presence has altered perceptions significantly." "Just needed a bridge," Jack said, his arm comfortably around her shoulders, a human gesture of affection she had come to appreciate. "Someone to show both sides what's possible when you combine strengths instead of focusing on differences." They paused at the edge of the forest where they had once faced the Mysic pack together. A formal observation platform had been constructed here, part of the early warning system Jack had designed, a blend of motion sensors and physical observation posts. "Did you ever imagine this when your ship crashed here?" Kel asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Jack laughed softly. "Not even close. I was just looking for repairs and a few days' shelter. Instead, you acquired a mate, 3 offspring, and responsibility for colony innovation initiatives. Best navigation error I ever made," he replied, turning to face her directly. His expression held what she had learned to recognize as contentment, the human equivalent of her own harmonics. "Though I'm still not convinced it was actually an error." "What alternative explanation would you propose?" Kel asked, her scientific mind intrigued. Jack's 5-fingered hand gently traced the curve of her face, in the gesture that always created pleasant neural responses. "Maybe the universe has better navigation than we do sometimes. Brings people where they need to be, not just where they think they're going." Years ago, Kel would have dismissed such a notion as illogical sentiment. Now she recognized the value in perspectives that transcended pure rationality. "An interesting hypothesis, worth researching further," Jack suggested, with the smile that still accelerated her circulation. As they returned to their dwelling, they passed other colonists who offered the formal acknowledgements that had gradually evolved to include Jack as a recognized community member. Ahead, their combined dwelling glowed with welcoming light, the sound of offspring engaged in evening activities carrying faintly through the air. Inside, Tev was assisting his siblings with a complex, 3-dimensional puzzle Jack had designed, a teaching tool that required both logical analysis and intuitive problem-solving. They looked up at their parents' return, their expressions showing the blend of Lumari reserve and human expressiveness that had become their unique characteristic. "Mother Kel, Jack father," Tev greeted them formally, then added with the slight vocal modulation that indicated excitement, "We have achieved 63% completion." "Impressive," Jack acknowledged, examining their progress. "You're working together effectively." "Logical analysis combined with intuitive leaps produces optimal results," Pier recited, clearly repeating something Jack had taught them. "Like Lumari and humans together." Kel's antennae quivered with the harmonics of contentment as she observed her family, a configuration that would have once seemed impossible, yet now felt unquestionably right. Different species, different evolutionary paths, different approaches to the universe, yet together forming something greater than either could achieve alone. As the night deepened and the offspring retired to their rest chambers, Jack and Kel stood together at the dwelling's observation portal, looking outward at the stars that had once separated their kinds, but had ultimately brought them together. "The human expression is, 'Home is where the heart is,'" Jack said quietly. "Took me losing everything to find that truth." Kel's four-fingered hand intertwined with his five-fingered one in the gesture that had become their personal symbol of connection across differences. Perhaps that is the true meaning of human exceptionalism. Not superior strength or intelligence, but the capacity to find belonging where none was thought possible. Jack smiled. "I think it's something even better, the human ability to recognize that differences don't have to divide us. Sometimes they're exactly what makes us stronger together." As they stood watching the stars, Kel reflected on how a simple emergency landing had initiated a transformation that now extended beyond their family to the entire colony and potentially beyond. Separate evolutionary paths converging to create new possibilities neither species had imagined alone. In the vast expanse of space, filled with countless worlds and species, perhaps this was the greatest discovery. That connection across differences wasn't just possible, but essential for true progress. That the universe's greatest resources weren't minerals or technologies, but the infinite combinations of perspectives when diverse beings chose to work together. A human and a Lumari, standing side by side beneath alien stars, had discovered this truth together. And in doing so, they had changed not just their own lives, but potentially the future of both their species.